What is up, guys? My name is Nick Hanna. I'm a pro natural bodybuilder and a contest prep coach. In today's video, I'm going to run you through exactly how to structure your diet, your nutrition, your macros in a contest prep, and a few little tips and tricks along the way to make sure that you get to stage in stage condition. From the early stages of the prep all the way to peak week, we'll cover everything from macros to nutrient timing to specifics on carbohydrates and why they are so important. Additionally, I'll show you how I structure my nutrition to earn my pro card. Starting your prep right is super important, and what I mean by that is understanding the calorie intake that you need to be consuming in order to lose weight. That's ultimately what we're wanting to do in a contest prep. So, as I currently eat my poached eggs on toast, of course, an absolute treat of mine. Is it applicable in contest prep? It can be, it may not be, depends on your calorie requirements. Just want to caveat this entire video with saying, obviously, this is just general advice and not specific to you individually. Of course, if you do want some more specific advice and guidance, please hit me up and I'd love to help you through the journey from a contest prep perspective. As I said, before you start your contest prep, you need to understand your base or maintenance calories. So what is the amount of calories that you need to consume to hold or maintain your body weight? It's going to be different for everyone, of course. Depends on your activity levels, depends on your body weight, depends on the amount of muscle that you actually have, depends on how hard you train. So it all depends. Oh, did you see that egg yolk drip? You can see it on the camera. Once you've determined your maintenance calories or your starting calories, we want to be dropping it a decent amount to get the fat loss or the weight loss kick-started from the get-go. So whether that's a 20-25% drop from the get-go, predominantly from carbohydrates and fats. We want to make sure that protein remains, relatively consistent and high throughout the entire prep. For example, when I started my contest prep in February of 2024, I was on over 4,000 calories. I think it was about 4,300 on a training day, and that got slashed by, again, roughly 25% to about 3,200, give or take, to start on a training day, and about 3,000 on a non-training day. When we think of macronutrient split, so what I did from the get-go and what we did was protein remained consistent, and at that point I was doing 300 protein per day. That was consistent through the off season, and it remained consistent at the start of the prep. So I always like to start with that as a base and then transition into fat sources. So I wanted to have a minimum amount of fats in my diet, and I think that was 50 on a training day, 60 on a non-training day, and then the remaining calories were made up of carbohydrates. Just to elaborate a little bit further, so for example, you're a 200-pound individual, which is about 90 kilos or 90.7 to be specific, and you're starting a contest prep at that body weight. Obviously, we're wanting to drop calories by about 20 to 30%, depending on what your starting position is, to make sure that we are in a calorie deficit. Starting with protein, we want to be sitting at roughly 1.2 to 1.5 grams of protein per pound of body weight. So what that might look like is roughly 240 to 300 grams of protein for a 90 kilo / 200 pound individual. Then we transition into fats. So fats is a bit of a wide spectrum. So it might range from anywhere from 0.2 to 0.5 grams per pound of body weight for that individual. So what that might look like is anywhere between 40 to 100 grams of fat. We then make up the remaining calories from carbohydrates. Moving forward, when we do make changes, fat sources are a really good source to pull from, but we don't want to be dropping too low below this threshold. Obviously, need to keep in mind that our body weight does decrease, so those sort of brackets will slightly change. But again, everyone is very much person dependent. Keys when it comes to tracking in a contest prep include MyFitnessPal, Chronometer, Macro Factor. All of those apps are terrific. So I would urge anyone who is in a contest prep to make sure that you are tracking diligently, whether you're following a strict meal plan or you're following macros and with slight tweaks or adjustments throughout the prep. Each to their own, and each has its place depending on the person. So obviously tracking is paramount. What we track, we can ultimately make decisions on. If we're not tracking and we don't know what we're consuming, we're just shooting darts blind, aren't we? All right, onto the golden window: carbohydrates, pre-workout, intra-workout, post-workout, also known as the peri-workout window. Now, the reason it is so important to ensure our carbohydrates are structured around this window is to maintain and retain our performance within the gym. Ultimately, the goal in a contest prep is, from a training perspective, to retain the muscle tissue that we built in the off season as we diet down and strip off all of the fat. Pre-workout meal here, I've got chicken and rice. Now, this is pretty basic, but I want to go through some framework to consider when you do map out what your pre-workout meal looks like. You want to consider something that is easily digestible, so keep it simple. Saying that during a contest prep, as hunger levels go through the roof, and you might end up actually getting a bit hungry through your workout, particularly if the pre-workout meal doesn't sustain you for too long, you can actually incorporate, 5 to 10 grams of fat in that pre-workout meal to ensure it slows the digestion and sustains you through your workout. As far as carbohydrates go, a good rule of thumb, anywhere from at least 60 grams to 100 grams of carbohydrates in your pre-workout meal is a great sweet spot. Obviously, you want to caveat that with saying your overall calorie intake is paramount, but just something to consider. And also something that we can't forget when it comes to our pre-workout is salt. Pop in some salt on your pre-workout meal. Super important. Ensure that you've got your electrolyte balance in check, as well as you've got plenty of sodium to get those pumps. Next up, we want to talk about intra-workout. Intra-workout is super, super vital. Not only is obviously your pre-workout, your post-workout important, but your intra-workout as well. So during a contest prep, your training is paramount. I know I bang on about that, but that's because it is so important, your training during a contest prep. I'm a huge advocate for ensuring carbohydrates remain in your intra-workout throughout the entire contest prep. For me personally, I had 25 grams of carbs in my intra-workout entirety of prep, even leading up to my last and final training sessions, always in. The rationale for that is we want to ensure that we've got some form of fuel within our workout, so highly branched cyclic dextrin. So 25 grams in here, we've got EAAs, we've got creatine, we've got electrolytes. So it's just another feeding window throughout the day. And I'm a huge advocate for it. So some people would often say that's a waste of calories. No, definitely not. So my advice for anyone, and something that I heard from someone, is let's say you're on 300 carbs for the day. Almost think of it, you're on 275 because the carbs from the highly branched cyclic dextrin remains constant throughout. I would always consider it to be within your intra-workout regardless. Don't take it out unless you absolutely have to. At least 20-25 grams, highly branched cyclic dextrin or an easily digestible carbohydrate source. This is my go-to. Pro tip when it comes to your intra-workout, I'm roughly halfway through, if not maybe 2/3 of the way through my session, and I've nailed my intra-workout, all of it. So my tip for anyone who has intra-workout is to get those carbohydrates into your system so you can actually utilize them. There's no point saving them to the end of your workout where you're just going to be refilling your glycogen by way of your post-workout. So have this and make sure that you nail it, relatively, halfway, if not 2/3 of the way through your session, so you can actually utilize it. Next up, the post-workout meal. So what do we want to get out of our post-workout meal? We want to ensure that we get a decent carbohydrate intake in this post-workout window. If you can get anywhere between 90 to 150 grams of carbohydrates, even incorporating some, simple sugars in that post-workout window is a great idea. So for me personally, throughout the entirety of my contest prep, it was generally cream of rice with whey and berries. That was my general rule of thumb, and obviously the quantities adjust accordingly as my calorie needs adjust. I will say there is no rush in consuming your post-workout meal. It's not as if you need to be smashing down a shake immediately post that final set of bicep curls. You can drive home, you can wait a little bit, and within the hour, get that post-workout meal in. I would aim to be in a relaxed state when you are consuming this post-workout meal. Ideally minimal fiber to ensure it digests super easily and the carbohydrates get in your system and you can refill glycogen stores. Equally very low fat as well to not slow down the digestion. So let's talk about micronutrients. So you can't just be eating chicken, rice, oats. You need to get in a variety of micronutrients in your diet. My guidance is to get at least 2 to 3 servings of vegetables per day and 2 to 3 servings of fruit per day in your diet. Yes, maybe on a daily basis there may not be a huge amount of variety, but I think over like a weekly basis you need to be having a widespread variety, different colors, different textures, to ensure that you get a widespread range of micronutrients. This will ultimately help with digestion, immune support, overall energy, and sustainability throughout this contest prep. Digestion will ultimately become more sensitive the closer and deeper you are in a contest prep. You know, some common examples are cruciferous vegetables do become challenging for people to digest. You know, things like broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, things in that nature can become challenging. Often things like, you know, zucchini, asparagus, peppers, and things like that are really good sources because they are often digested really well for most people. Some examples from a fruit perspective and changes that you can make in your contest prep. At the start, it might be mango, banana. Since they are on the higher end of the carbohydrate intake for a fruit, you might then, you know, transition to more things like berries, like blueberries, blackberries, raspberries, strawberries for that matter. Evidently, it's then important to ensure that you have a sufficient vegetable intake throughout the day, and they mostly will be in those meals outside of your pre and post-workout meals. Okay, so you're in your contest prep and you really want to map out your meals throughout the day, macronutrient, meal by meal. Let's give you a proper example and show you how you can do this and what to do. Let's assume that your calories are roughly 3,000. This will be 2,950 for the purposes of this example, and we've determined that your macros are 250 protein, 50 fat, and 350 carb. So what do? How do we split it up throughout the day? So assuming we're training after 2 meals, meal number 1, 50 protein, 20 fat for a bit extra fat, 50 carbohydrates. Then we'll have our pre-workout meal. So as we know, we want to keep protein consistent, so 50 protein again. We'll have a little bit of fat to slow down the digestion of that meal, so 10 fat. And we want to have a decent amount of carbohydrates. So we're going to have 75 carbohydrates in that pre-workout meal. Then we're also going to have our 25 grams of highly branched cyclic dextrin or simple carbohydrates intra-workout. Then for post-work, again, we're going to have 50 grams of protein, 100 grams of carbohydrates, trace fats, so no fats in that meal. Then the last 2 meals, being effectively meal 4 and 5, will be quite similar. Will be 50 protein in both of those, 10 fat and 50 carbohydrates. So that means that you've got 50 protein in every single meal. You've got fats predominantly at the start of the day to keep your hunger levels in queue, and then spread out across all other meals except for your post-workout. Then carbohydrates, you know, tailored slightly towards your pre, intra, post-workout, and spread then evenly throughout the rest of the day. That's a basic framework. And then obviously from there, if adjustments need to be made, food needs to be pulled, what can you do? So you would ideally pull, let's say, carbohydrates from, you know, non-pre, intra, and post-workout, and then maybe some fats from externally from maybe that first meal or maybe some of those last couple meals. So that's just a basic framework of how you potentially could set things up. That's exactly how I structured my nutrition in my 2024 contest prep, which led me to become a pro natural bodybuilder. I went from off-season to stage ready. It works. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. If you're in a prep or you're thinking about going into a contest prep, please comment down below and I will answer each and every one of your questions. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more future natural bodybuilding content. Until then, I'll catch you in the next one.